Hi, this is Gail Sokol. On today's show, we're going to be discussing Rugalach.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Gail Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
On today's show, we're going to be talking about Rugalach, which is an Eastern European cookie. Some people say Rugalach, some people say Rugalach, and it is not arugula. That is the green vegetable. So we're not talking about a green vegetable, although arugula is very good. So I want to show you what this special cookie is. It takes a little finesse to make. There's a couple of ways to make it. And I will divulge to you all my secrets and actually tell you where you can get a fabulous recipe for one. So typically, it's a flaky cookie, and it starts with a standard Rugalach dough. It consists of 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 sticks of butter, and that's 1 cup of butter, but that's 2 sticks or 16 tablespoons of butter, and 8 ounces of cream cheese. And if you mix that all up, and this is softened butter and softened cream cheese, so leave it out of the refrigerator for maybe an hour or so. Blend it in an electric mixer, and it will form a dough. It will not form a dough that you can use right away, so you're going to have to take that dough, put it directly on a piece of plastic wrap, fold it up, tuck that baby into bed, and put that dough into a flattened disc, maybe an inch thick flattened disc, into the refrigerator and leave it there for up to several days. You can even freeze it. All right, so let's talk about what Rugalach is. So I gave you the basic dough. It's usually filled, and it's filled with fabulous things. Things like jam, cinnamon sugar, raisins. I love to fill mine with ganache, chopped cherries, and walnuts. And wait till you see my recipe. Oh, it's so good. And you can even make Rugalach savory. Yeah, savory. So you could actually serve it at a cocktail party or a wine tasting or a wine and cheese party or getting the neighbors together for an outdoor barbecue party and just have them made ahead of time because they're so easy to make. You can fill them with pesto, different cheeses, sun-dried tomatoes chopped up, cream cheese, olives, green olives, black olives, any type of olives you want. And any type of filling you can actually think of. Crab meat, anything you want. So once you have this dough turns into a flaky dough because you have so much fat and flour that when you really roll it out, you're going to have a lot of tenderness, but you're also going to see the flakes. I love flaky dough. And what's happening with flaky dough is you're making layers of fat and dough, which is the flour part, and that fat is going to melt in the oven and leave little spaces. And those little spaces are going to fill with moisture, which turn to steam. And steam, we all know, is very powerful. So if you're boiling a pot of water over the stove with a top on it, and it comes to a boil and you don't notice, that top will tell you it's boiling because the top will almost pop off. So steam is a very powerful leavening agent. And it will puff up on the dough above and below in that Rugalach, inside that Rugalach. So here we go. Forming the Rugalach. How do you take this dough that we just made, this flour, butter, and cream cheese? Super easy, right? Well, you roll it out. And I like to do it 2 different ways. One way is the way I used to do it, and then I developed another method. As I was reading and doing research, it's sort of an easier method that I'll get to. But the first method is the traditional method, the typical Rugalach rolling out method. And I call it the pie wedge method. I don't think anyone calls it the pie wedge method, but I call it, just bear with me. So you're going to take a 9-inch bowl or a 10-inch bowl, And you're going to roll out maybe a half of your rugelach dough, cut it in half with a knife or a dough cutter. Roll it on a very, very well floured surface. And you're going to take this bowl, this 9-inch bowl, maybe a stainless steel bowl or serving bowl that's 9 inches in diameter, put it upside down over the dough and cut around it with a knife. Now take whatever you didn't cut, the outside, pull it off so you have this perfect circle. And then what you're going to do is, with a pastry brush, you can put some melted butter on it. You're looking for the filling to stick to something, and an adhesive needs to be placed onto that dough. So egg wash is actually a very good thing to do, or melted butter. Melted butter probably tastes better, so use melted butter in this case. Once you have a little melted butter over it, you can put cinnamon sugar. You can make your own little concoction of cinnamon sugar. You can even put in pumpkin pie spice, apple pie spice, ginger, even crystallized chopped ginger. I just thought of that. That's I got to write that down. That's actually a really good a good filling. And actually sprinkle it all over the surface. And when you're done, or it could also be jam, it could be anything you want. Once you're done, you want to take a pizza wheel. All right, so I call this the pie wedge method, or you could call it the pizza wedge method too. That would work. And you're going to cut this circle into wedges. And don't think of a pizza, so you're not going to get a huge slice of pizza or rugelach. You're going to make thin, long, like isosceles triangles. So just cut this dough into thin triangles. So you might get maybe 16 of them, 12 if you really want fat ones, but 16 if you want a good size rugelach dough to make a nice rugelach cookie. And then once you're done cutting them, you start rolling them. So you'll take a wedge and start gently rolling it in like you do a crescent roll or a croissant if you've made croissants. And you just pull, just gently roll. When you get to the tip of that isosceles triangle, pull it out a little bit so you have even more times that you get to roll it into a coil. Now remember, each time you coil it, what have you done? You've created flaky layers. Remember we talked about before in the oven how these flaky layers are made? So the more layers of dough around this filling, the more flakiness you're going to have. So once you get these rugelach all rolled up, all 16 of these isosceles triangles with these delicious fillings in them, you're going to put them on a sheet pan covered with parchment paper, or it could be aluminum foil, whatever you want. And you're going to make sure that the tip of that isosceles triangle is tucked under, because you don't want them to unroll in the oven, right? That would be terrible. And you usually bake them for about maybe about 15 minutes until they get nice and brown at about 350 degrees. And they are wonderful. Sometimes I like to, when they're fresh out of the oven and they've cooled down a little bit, I love to put them into confectioner's sugar. I just love to powder them. And to see people take a bite out of them and see that sugary coating, and then inside those chopped nuts or the cinnamon sugar or the jam or the savory. You don't do it with savory filling. Don't roll them in confectioner's sugar after you have put on some savory pesto or something like that, just for the sweet, obviously. And then you just serve them up. They also freeze really well. So you can put them on a single layer in an airtight container and separate them by wax paper if you have many layers of them, and then pop them in the freezer. And you could just take them out of the freezer, let them sit at room temperature, and you've got rugelach to go whenever you want. So that is one method. That is the pie wedge, or the also pizza wedge method. The next one is, I call it the rectangle method. So I take my dough, I divide it into fourths, right? 4 pieces. And I roll each quarter separately, one at a time, into a rectangle. And I don't even really measure this rectangle. It can be any size you want. It ends up being maybe 12 by 6. It's not going to end up being super, super big, but you don't want it to be too thin. If it's paper thin, you're going to rip your dough. make sure you do it on a floured surface. And the other thing I'm going to ask you to do is get some wax paper on a sheet pan and keep one piece of wax paper on a sheet pan. And after you get this rectangle, pick it up. You'll be able to pick it up because it's still going to be chilled, remember, because you've chilled this dough. And you're going to lift it up and put it on this wax paper. Now you're going to put another piece of wax paper on top of that rectangle, and you're going to roll out the second rectangle. So you see where I'm going with this? You're rolling out each quarter of dough into a rectangle. You're putting it down onto a piece of wax paper, and you're going to put them in the fridge until you're ready to roll them out. You can even keep them there for a couple of days if you're not ready for your rugelach right away. So when you are ready, I like to take out one rectangle at a time, because the one thing about rugelach dough, it gets super warm super fast. And the more you handle it, remember, your hands are about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and butter's going to melt, and cream cheese is going to soften, and you're going to end up with mush. I've done it, so make sure, or else you're going to end up putting everything back in the fridge to chill off. So make sure you keep everything chilled. So take one rectangle out at a time, and this is where you're going to fill it. You do your melted butter. You can do any type of filling you want after that, savory or sweet. And then you're going to roll it up almost like you do a cinnamon roll. So like a tight coil, like you're rolling up a towel, very tight. Remember, the more coil, the more spirals you have, the more flaky layers. Now, what I love to do is I like to spread ganache over that. Remember that incredible concoction of simmered cream, and then you put chocolate chunks in there, chopped chocolate, and let it melt into this beautiful mass of chocolatiness. You're going to spread that, or any type of pesto, anything you want on this dough, this rectangle. Roll it up real tight. And at this point, you're going to score it with a knife. You're going to score it into however many slices you want. Don't make them too thin. Just score. Don't cut all the way through. And then pick up this long log and put it on a sheet pan covered with parchment paper. All right, not the one with wax paper, because I'm telling you, folks, wax paper burns in the oven. You don't want to put that in there. So get parchment paper on a sheet pan, and you can probably put 2 logs per sheet pan because they will spread a little. Once you have all 4 done, and maybe 2 on each sheet pan with parchment paper, filled as you want them and scored, you will put them in the oven until they get nice and brown, just like you did with the pizza or pie wedge method. And when they come out, this is when I let them cool a little bit, and then I cut through with a knife, and I separate those where I scored. I cut through that, and that's when you see those beautiful layers of whatever filling you have sort of peeking out, and it's spectacular. So I usually bake these about 40 minutes. They can take quite a long amount of time. I mean, 40 minutes in the scheme of things to wait for this spectacular, yummy cookie is nothing. So about 350 degrees for about 40 minutes, or until they're nice and brown. Look at the color. You don't have to stick a knife into anything. If they're nice and brown, that's good enough for me, and it should be good enough for you. Take them out, and you can enjoy them. Again, the ones with the pie wedge method, put into confectioner's sugar if they have a sweet filling only. And I do that with my rectangle method as well. Now, if you want a fabulous chocolate cherry walnut rugelach, go to my new book, Baking with Success, and it is fabulous. It is a fabulous recipe to make. So we learned about this Eastern European cookie called rugelach that you can do different riffs and different takes on. It could be savory or sweet with different fillings. Use your imagination and make them. I think you'll be very, very happy with them. So if you have any questions, head on over to bakingradio.com and leave me a message. Maybe tell me about the rugelach you've made. I would love to answer some of your questions on air. And if you've particularly enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to leave a review, I would really appreciate it. On next program, we're going to be discussing gluten-free baking.